Hey guys, welcome to Girls Frontline 2, and you might be asking, how good is Mechty really, even at V0 especially? Okay, let's take a look at how she does in terms of her skills. Just want to give you guys a note that all of these effects here under Mechty here in the first column is actually available at V0 up until enemy debuffs. So, with that said, she is valuable starting off with V0. There are no additional gimmicks to unlock. You all have it. We'll discuss copies later in terms of vertebrae, what it usually unlocks. But more or less for V0, you're good to go with Mechty. And we'll start off with what she gives to Peritia. So, converts Peritia's action support attacks to Corrosion and provides additional buffs and debuffs that amplify corrosion damage taken by the enemies. That is going to be Dream Guardian, increased damage dealt by AoE support attacks. This is considered a buff and cannot be dispelled. She also gives out Nightmare Shield to all allies before being attacked, decreases the attacker's attack by 5%, and dispels one random debuff from self. If the attacker countered the holder's weakness, decreased damage received by 30%. This effect can only be activated once and is considered as a corrosion type buff. Also, Nightmare is also good, increasing AoE damage by 10%. So take note that all three of them have AoE damage. You have Mechty, you have Klukai, and you have Peritia. Increase AoE support damage by 50%, another 50%, and changes the damage type of AoE support damage to corrosion damage. This is considered a corrosion buff and cannot be dispelled. So that alone is ridiculous. So both Peritia and Klukai are recipients of Nightmare and Nightmare Shield, while Peritia gains an additional Dream Guardian as her, as she is buffed additionally for that. While for Mechty, what she does for herself is Recovery Mode, decreases damage received by 30% and stability damage received by 2 points. This cannot be dispelled. Frenzy Mode, increases attack and defense by 30. At the end of the action, increase Confectance Index by 2. This cannot be dispelled as well. Movement up, mobility increased by 2 tiles, considered a buff. Sleeping Aid, increased damage dealt by 10%. This can be stacked 2 times, considered a buff, and cannot be dispelled. And effects of Nightmare Shield and Nightmare also apply to Mechty. And the last one is the debuffs that she applies to your enemies. She has Acid Corrosion, reduces defense by 20, considered a corrosion defense buff. Toxic Shroud increases corrosion damage received by 25%. This is considered a corrosion type debuff. Toxic applies corrosion weakness to the enemy standing on it, deals fixed damage equivalent to 50% with caster's attack, and applies stability loss, which it's a stability damage over time effect. So those are the things that she gives at V1, and she is terrific. She's a perfect complement to Klukai and to Peritia. So going back to Mechty's role, she is a top tier defense shredding beast and also does a lot of dispelling. She has buffs and debuffs, you actually name it, as we already discovered. Okay, so no need for copies of her again. All her basic kit is loaded. So, but if you plan to take her to at least V1, so for V1, Recovery Mode will not be removed with entering into Frenzy Mode. Nightmare Shield, which is one of her, her effects in her skill, is decrease the attacker's attack by 10% and increases the number of debuffs cleansed by 1. New effect is added for Frenzy Mode, increase crit rate of basic attacks by 30%, which is actually a nice big buff to her and to Dream Wonderland, but it's not really necessary at this point. So for her fixed keys, 3 fixed keys if you're limiting your info cores. The best fixed keys that you should give her is number 1 is going to be Bedtime Warm-Up. This dispels 2 buffs from the target, although this is activated by the basic attack. But again, these spells are very handy, especially if you encounter some bosses that you need to trigger the spells early, and a lot of the spells, and if you need to erase a lot of the spells, definitely this is a good fixed key to have. The other fixed keys are going to be for fixed key number 3, Dreamquake. Before attacking, inflicts concentrated acid 2 on the large target for 2 turns. Large, assuming they're going to be your bosses. And for fixed key 4, Dreamless Night, generates toxic tiles in a 2-tile radius around the nearest enemy that lasts for 2 turns. So this one will increase, I think, damage, increase corrosion weakness. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. Increase damage weakness of enemies if they're on that tile. Okay, or increase their damage or corrosion damage if they're in that tile. I'm not sure. But again, these 3 here, 3, 4, 5, are the best to equip with her. The rest are, some of them are situational, but these 3, probably 2 of them would be good. Depending upon your choice, you could actually swap out one of them and, put in your selection as well. For the gun, you don't need to, you don't need to take Daydream. Again, the gun is more on basic attack, ignore, targets defense by 20%, but it does have an increased corrosion damage dealt by allies by 10%, which is a nice buff to have. But if you don't have the budget to pull for her weapon, and if you don't have Klukai's weapon, definitely you could go with a free-to-play option, which is going to be either Golden Melody or Planeta. So again, don't worry too much about the gun. She is going to be, comfortable with any of the recommended guns, especially if you're free to play. But again, if you take a look at her kit, guys, going back to what I mentioned, she is very playable. She brings a lot to the table, especially for corrosion teams. And I think she will be part of a good core team for you if you do have her with Kukai in that corrosion team together with Peridea. So thank you guys for staying this far. What do you think of Mechty, and are you going to be pulling for her? Stay safe, take care. This is the Warden, and I'm out of here.